Hello and welcome to the Shinybees podcast, a podcast for those who like their knitting, comedy and yarn in equally large measures. I'm your host Jo Millmine and this is episode 96, This Thing of Paper, an interview with Karie Westermann.
I feel a need to laugh again with you, if that's alright. I need a drink, I need a friend.
Hello and welcome into another episode of the Shinybees podcast. I am Jo and your hostess with the mostess. Today with you, bringing you another lovely interview that I have done with the fabulous Karie Westermann. If you are a new listener to the show, welcome. I hope you enjoy what you find here, and always a big thank you to all returning listeners who are coming back to spend time with me again. I do appreciate you being here. Thank you. I have to start with today a bit of news, quite a bit of news. This is what happens when you have a little miniature podcast break and with loads of stuff that I need to tell you about. And then we will crack into the interview, which is quite a long one, but one that I think you'll find really interesting. So first up, I had some brilliant feedback on the last episode, which was an interview with Lindsay, aka Countessa Blaze. I know that she's also been emailed by quite a few people actually, particularly talking about sort of autism awareness and how she doesn't let that hold her back in running her business. I said it last week and I'm quite happy to say it again. I think she does really, really well. She doesn't allow her autism to rule her life, and she knows her limitations, and she's always working really hard to overcome them and find ways of dealing with them. And the thing with autism is that it makes her really good at other stuff. So she just plays to her strengths, and that's how she makes it work. I'm a big fan of the way she does things. I like the way that she doesn't run her business in the same way that anyone else does. She doesn't do shows, she doesn't do wholesale, she just does her own thing and makes it work for her. That's the whole point of running your own business. That's the goal for everyone. So thank you to everyone who got in touch and left feedback for that, particularly Hannah and Chloe and as always Helen. Very, very supportive listeners, and I do appreciate you all. And even saying it could be my finest work yet. Alice said that. So, yeah, where do you go from here, eh? You know, if that's my finest work, yeah, I may as well just retire and sit in neon yarn all day. As an aside to that, if you haven't listened to the show, go back and listen now, quickly. Leave this one for now, go listen to that one. And if you did listen to it and you're thinking about getting involved with the Orange Mocha Frappuccino yarn, it is available now, but you need to be quick because all the ones that we dyed during the interview sold out in 2 hours. So, and they were only to people on my mailing list. So lesson 1, get on my mailing list. A link will be in the show notes. But basically, because we felt it was a bit mean to those who weren't on the mailing list and hadn't yet heard the interview, because it was only 2 days after it went out, that we would do a very, very limited pre-ordered run. She doesn't do pre-orders as a rule. And basically, because she's had such a good experience with being on the show and the positive feedback, and obviously kind of helped her take a big step, because she's never done an audio or video interview and she doesn't intend to do any more. She just did one for me because we're mates now, basically, and she wanted to push herself. So as a kind of thank you to all of you guys who've been really kind and got in touch with her, she agreed to do a pre-order on that. But that's already 2/3 sold out as well, like a day later when I'm recording this. So get in there quickly if you want to be involved, because she is super busy and she's already squeezing this in as a favour basically. So it has to be a very limited run, and it's going to be a quick turnaround. It'll be basically packed up and dispatched by the 1st of July. Pre-orders will close on the 20th of June if they've not sold out beforehand, and it looks like they are going to be at this rate, to be honest. So if you want to be involved, the URL is shinybees.com/orange-mocha-frappuccino. There will be links in the show notes, and there is a tab in the top level navigation of the website called Orange Mocha Frappuccino. So you can get involved there if you would like to. In other news then, I have been on a couple of podcasts whilst I was on my break, and I neglected to mention these last time. So I'm mentioning them now just in case you are looking for some extra stuff to listen to. First up, I was interviewed by the lovely, he's such a sweetheart, Harry Duran of Podcast Junkies podcast, and his show basically involves him chatting to podcasters of all different genres and finding out a bit more about their story, you know, why they podcast, what they think about things, chatting about their show, life in general really. It's basically, if you enjoyed the last episode, which was a bit of banter between mates, you'll enjoy this one because it's very similar. It's a bit of banter between myself and Harry. He has a very cute little dog called Disco. There was lots of talk of dogs in knitwear. There were some fringe pattern discussions, as well as kind of lessons for life and all sorts of other things that we got into by the end of it. It is episode 90, as I say, and that is me and Harry. You can find Podcast Junkies at their website, podcastjunkies.com. But I'll put a link straight in the show notes to my episode, assuming that's where you're going to start. But give his back catalogue a listen if you like, you know, listen along when you're knitting and want something a bit different. You'll probably enjoy it because it's a lot of conversations, intelligent conversations about all kinds of things with all sorts of different people and a lot of storytelling. I think you will enjoy that. I also did an interview with the New Media Europe podcast, and that is also available now. I don't think they number their podcasts, but it's called Military Operation, and I will link to that as well in the show notes if you want to listen to that one. The audio wasn't great on that, I must say, but if you want to know kind of more about the business side of things and what I do, then that's probably a good place for you to go as well. But I absolutely heartily recommend Harry's podcast as a good listen if you are a bit of an audio junkie, as they say. Also, speaking of New Media Europe, the nominations for that have now closed. Thank you very, very much to everybody that voted, both in the first round and in the second round via Twitter. The awards ceremony is next Saturday. I'm not sure if we've done enough to keep the award. Obviously, fingers crossed. I really hope that we have. But we will see. Basically, we will see. Helen from Curious Handmade is also going to be there because obviously her podcast, Curious Handmade podcast, is up for 2 awards as well. So it'd be great to see her again, the Nitty kind of crew, getting in there with all the podcast big boys. And I'm looking forward to catching up with her because she's really good fun. She is. I like Helen. And basically, my plan was to wear my voodoo shawl, which I've been knitting for months, as you know. And I posted to a very, very kind friend of mine, lovely, funny, really funny bloke, Russ. He's a listener as well. Hello, Russ. Posted it to him, and somehow it ended up going not to Devon, which it was addressed to, signed for, correct address on the receipt, and somehow went to Elgin, which is very strange because I did used to live in Elgin, and Elgin is about 700 miles away, for those who are not familiar with UK geography, 700 miles away from where it was actually meant to be. I would not recommend using Wigan General Post Office to anybody because I've only posted 2 things at the counter there recently. The first one, they stuck the signed for thing on the wrong side and they delivered it back to me the next day. Signed for, and I had to sign for it, and then they're like, oh, you'll have to pay again. I don't think so, sunshine. I will not be paying again because you stuck it on the wrong side, morons. And clearly they can't get this right. So it's been lost in the post for about 2 weeks now, and nobody seems to know where it is, and it's just disappeared basically. So I'm not going to be wearing that. Russ was going to block it for me because it's a Pico bind off, and now I just wanted to die basically. I don't think I would have ever blocked it had I not sent it. No, I did send him some orange mocha frappuccino yarn from the one on Wigan Lane. A different post office, got there the next day. Moral of the story, if you're in Wigan and you need to post anything, do not use the one on Walgate near the stations. It's rubbish. But yes, so I need a new shawl. Is basically how I've kind of worked round from I've lost my months of beaded work, 500 and odd meters, 1,000 and odd beads, months and months and months of work is floating around somewhere. I suspect it's still in Elgin sorting office, but because it's been signed as scanned as saying it's gone, obviously it's not there. I know full well it's there. I know it's on a shelf. I know it is, but do you know what they're like? The computer says no. So maybe at some point it will turn up again. But in case it doesn't, I feel like I need a new shawl. And clearly the answer to all my problems right now is not to just get one out of the cupboard that, could use one from last year, for instance. No, what I think I might do is just knit a new one. Knit a new shawl to cheer me up by next Saturday. And I thought, you know what, seeing as that the Helen's going to be there, I am going to knit Talisman, which is, if you're not aware, you don't listen to Helen, she's just released a subscription club, shawl pattern subscription club called the Shawl Society. It is 6 patterns, one a month from now till basically November, when I assume it's going to be Knit Vent again straight after that. Because that's the usual form. She always has a set of patterns out at Christmas, and the first one has been released. As I say, it's called Talisman. It's a semicircular shawl, and it is one of the patterns. One of the yarns called for is Urban Hints by the lovely Wool Kitchen. I interviewed Helen a few episodes ago. If you haven't heard that, there'll be a link in the show notes to pop back to her. And basically, I'm gonna try and knit Helen's shawl in a week, because this is what I need to be doing right now. And if you want to get involved with the Shawl Society, it looks really good. It's dead exciting and mysterious, and yeah, I'm quite excited. And basically, I'm gonna kind of wind the yarn this afternoon and just start knitting and hopefully get it done by then. We'll see. It might stop me working at night, because I work at night a lot at the moment. That's bad news. So that's what I'm going to do. That's my answer to the problem. If it all goes horribly wrong, then I can just carry on knitting it on the journey down, the journey back. It'll be a nice memory. And I'll take my other shawl just in case. But basically, yeah, I'm going to go for it and try and knit this one, because I think, a nice bright orangey, corally shawl is going to go down a treat, because it's a black tie event. So get yourself over to check out the Shawl Society. And if you're new to knitting shawls and you're not quite sure that you're up to committing to a long kind of subscription for them, although it's very, very good value for the 6 patterns, it basically works out at half price of what they would be if you got them separately. She has a free shawl workshop that she's delivering via email. It's called the Spindrift Shawl Workshop. So you get the Spindrift pattern, and then you'll get her hints and tips for how to complete your shawl and finish it and block it and all that kind of thing, completely for free. So if you've never done a shawl before and you're a bit new to knitting and knitting shawls and you want to try it, then I recommend you sign up to the Shawl Workshop. Again, there'll be links for that in the show notes. But if you go to curioushandmade.com, you'll find the sign up anyway. There's a little graphic in the sidebar and you'll find it there. I've had her stuff through. I thought it was really good. Not knitted the Spindrift shawl yet, obviously, because I never knit anything anymore. But it was really good. I thought it would be really helpful if you are a new knitter. Next in the news, at 13 and a half minutes, I told you it was a long one, is if you are a budding designer, and I know quite a few of you are, and I think you come and listen to the podcast for kind of business type reasons, Jolie of Jolie Creates and Kate Heppel of Knit Now are putting together a Designer's Day Out workshop. It's going to be in person. It's in Z for Black in Manchester in the UK on the 16th of July from 10 till 4. And the cost is £65, including lunch, and apparently as much tea and toast as you can eat. So I was kind of, they had me at tea and toast, but I don't really want to do designing, so I was just like, can I just come along for tea and toast? But it looks to be a really good event if you're getting into designing yourself, because obviously Jolie does a lot of tech editing stuff and designs things, and Kate is the editor of Knit Now. She also designs quite a lot of her own patterns too. So if you're wanting to sort of submit to magazines and things like that, then they're going to have some really good information for you. Link for that will be in the show notes. And finally, from this week, I'm going to put the podcast on a bi-weekly schedule, not twice a week, every other week, just to clarify. So the next episode for the show will be out on the 28th of June. There is a reason for this, and I've sort of hinted at it already, and that is that I am starting a new venture and a new podcast. It's not about knitting, just putting that out there right now. It is about entrepreneurship for military spouses, veterans and serving personnel. And it is going to be called the Notice to Move podcast. There will be a community as well associated with it, and it's going to be launching on the 25th of June. Now, this has been bubbling for a long time. I actually registered the domain last July I've been thinking about it for such a long time and working around this concept or this idea that I've got for it, and not really taken action on it because obviously I'm so kind of committed into this podcast and my work with people in the industry and knitting business, and also running the Golden Skein as well. And the connection is, if you haven't already kind of picked up on it before, is that I'm ex-military. I've mentioned that before, and did 6 years in the Royal Air Force. But the reason why we move house so much is not because we're running away from debt collectors or anything like that. It's because we are a military family, and that's why we move house so much, because my husband is serving in the military. So that is why I'm so kind of viscerally sort of connected to this topic, and why I want to do some work in this area, because I feel that there's a lot that can be done to help people who are running their own businesses and balancing that off against being a military spouse or veteran or serving person, and the unique challenges that come with that, on top of just the challenges of running a business. You know, it is a very specific lifestyle, and it does put a lot of interesting opportunities in your path, but it can be challenging at times as well. So I'm really excited. I've already done my first lot of interviews for it. I'm super keen to get involved and actually get this project running and stop putting it off, basically. The word for the year was commit, and it is time now to commit to this concept, to this community, and to doing this work. I can't ignore the calling that I'm getting about this anymore, so I need to go in there and explore it. So if that is you, if you are a veteran, if you are a military spouse, if you are serving personnel and you are running your own business, or you would like to, and you want to be notified about all the stuff to do with Notice to Move, go to noticetomove.com. There is a really quick splash page there. You can sign up to the newsletter and you'll be notified when it all goes live. But obviously, the next 2 weeks are going to be quite busy, which is why I need time just to make sure everything is tickety-boo with this. If it is not you, but you know someone that falls into that category, please do pass it on, because there's going to be loads of good stuff on there. I've got some really exciting interviews and lots of interesting stuff to share with you. There will be a lot of business chat as well, so if you come here for the business chat, then there will be some of it, not necessarily knitting business chat, but it will be business in general, and there'll be lots of talking to people who are running businesses and how they kind of overcome challenges in military life and their stories, really. So that is Notice to Move. It's my business baby, and I'm dead super excited to be getting involved and basically following this. The drums are getting louder, and I need to listen, basically. So that is all my news for this week. I appreciate that was a really big news section, but get yourself ready now, because I've got the fabulous Karie Westermann in for an interview. She is originally from Denmark and has been based in Scotland, in Glasgow, for the past few years. She's a knitting designer, teacher, writer, editor, and she is just in the middle of doing her first Kickstarter for her first ever printed, full-on, proper printed book. She's written books before, but they've been electronic versions. So it sounds like a fascinating project. It was already, when we did the interview, fully funded, and I think it's about double the amount now, and the campaign is still ongoing, so you'll be able to find out all the details for that, and I encourage you to go over and check that out. But in the meantime, get your knitting, get a nice cup of tea, feet up, let's settle in and have a chat with Karie. Lovely. Well, I'm absolutely delighted to be welcoming today Karie Westermann onto the show. How are you, Karie?
I'm okay, thank you very much. I've got a bit of a cold, so my voice sounds a bit weird, but I'm okay, thank you.
Oh, well, hopefully you recover from that quickly and it's not getting in the way of you knitting too much.
It's not. No, no. I have been traveling a lot, so I think it's just all the travel and all the stress and all the sorts of things that made my body go, "Whoa, time for a summer cold." It's all
Yeah,
good.
yeah, definitely. I do enjoy seeing your train journeys and where you're up to on Instagram, I must say.
Hmm. Yeah, I have a little hashtag called workshop season. And when I first started posting, some people said, "You do travel a lot." And I sort of sat down and thought, yeah, maybe I do travel a lot. I don't really think about that because
Mm.
it's just something I do. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Well, for those people who maybe haven't met you before, can you tell us a
Mhm.
bit about you as a person and how you came to be interested in yarny pursuits?
Well, as I say, my name is Karie Westermann. I work as a knitwear designer and a tutor, and as a jill of all trades, really, in the knitting industry. I am based in Glasgow, in Scotland, but I'm originally from Denmark, hence my slightly weird accent. And how did I get into it? Well, it kind of started like many people. I used to knit as a child, and then life happened, and I got away from it. And then I unfortunately fell very ill and I couldn't do anything. I was stuck in bed for 9 months and I couldn't read. I couldn't listen to the radio. I couldn't watch TV. So I said to my partner, David, could you go down and buy me some knitting needles and some yarn? Because I used to be able to knit and at least I could do something. And it turned out that I really enjoyed knitting. And throughout my recovery, I just began really to get obsessed with knitting. And about a year and a half later, I was offered a job with a yarn company.
Mm.
It was back in the early days of Ravelry, where you could still have a project page and people would contact you and offer you jobs. I don't really think they do that so much more nowadays, but I was offered a job, part-time job with a yarn company based in Glasgow, and I said yes, and that's kind of where it started. It was not something I ever set out to do, but life happened, and I began working in knitting, um, almost just like that. Yeah.
So, obviously, you kind of talked a bit there about how you came to knitting at maybe not the kind of highest point in your life and it helped you through your recovery. And then
Mm,
you came to be working part time for a yarn company. What
yeah.
was the tipping point that sort of took that job, because even if it is with a yarn company, it's still a
Mm-hmm.
job,
Hmm.
into kind of Karie bookish knits and how you develop your design career
Um,
outside of that?
well, what happened was that quite early on when I started working for them, my job was mainly to provide pattern support for them
Mm.
and to do some tutoring and to work a lot with spreadsheets. It's basically what I do now, but just for them. And we discovered that we had a backlog of beads in a stock room, and I was asked to design patterns that would use up beads so we could get rid of this excess stock. And so I designed my very first design was a little scarf for beads, and we gave away about 500 of those patterns within a month.
Mm.
And I thought, okay, let me try that again. And I made another pattern. I wrote another pattern called Florence, which is up on Ravelry as a free pattern now, and that was a huge, huge success. And I sort of sat down and thought, I just gave that work away to a yarn company. Obviously, they'd give me yarn support, but I'd not been paid for my work at that stage. And I sort of sat down and thought, if I'd been given 10p for every pattern we'd been handing out, that would have made a significant difference to my monthly income.
Mm.
And then a good friend of mine who's a yarn dyer was going to Knit Nation. Lilith of all,
Oh.
yeah, Lilith of All Maiden Art is in my knitting group, and she said to me, "I've been watching you doing some designing. I'm launching a new yarn. Here are two skeins. I want a shawl pattern." And I came back with what's the Karie shawl, which was my first to pay for pattern on Ravelry, and it did really well. And I think it was just sort of the combination of me being asked to do things and me sort of realizing, I can actually do this. I have a history throughout my career, people urging me to do things like like you, Joe, you've urged me to do things as well, and I've gone, yeah. Um, so that was kind of where I sort of sat down and thought, this is actually a viable thing to do on the side. It's I wasn't, a designer at all for the yarn company apart from those two projects. So it wouldn't be anything that would interfere my day-to-day part-time job. So let's see what happens if I start thinking more about doing my own things. And it grew from there quite quickly. We're talking today on a day where it's been 3 years since I launched a really big collection of mine, and I'm sort of looking back and thinking that was only 3 years ago.
Mm.
And it's all moved very quickly from there, and sort of sitting down and figuring out, the Karie bookish umbrella, anything like that. It's all that's something that's happened very organically, but very quickly at the same time.
No, again, it's really interesting to hear kind of how it's evolved for people who maybe,
Mm,
we don't often get to see behind the scenes of how these things happen. We just start to
yeah,
see patterns and people develop things in a very creative process. And when you're kind of a knitter, you quite often you're on the outside. You don't get the inside scoop on
yeah.
how and why it's gone that way, and the
I
plans for
would
it.
say, for me at least, there's not ever been a real strategy with first I do X and then I do Y and that will lead to Z. I think it's happened really organically for me where I was put in a position where you need to produce a pattern. Oh my God, people like it. What happens if I do that? Oh, people like it, and sort of grow with that rather than go out all guns blazing, having everything set in stone from day one. And it sort of allowed me to figure out who I am as a designer and what it is I do, because you can't really go out straight off and go, this is me, I'm fully formed. But it's been a growth process and a learning process along the way. And I think for me, what's been key actually is that I started out working in the industry in a position that allowed me to meet knitters and actually hear what knitters wanted to knit and
Mm.
what they found difficult. Um, and a broad section of the knitting world, not just, um, Ravelry style knitters with a capital K, like you and me, we live the
Mm.
lifestyle. But people who may just, knit once or twice a year, do one sock every winter or something like that. And so just understand that whole plethora and difference there are out there, in terms of knitters and knitting and sort of have that as a background to my design work rather than go in and go, I'm a designer now and this is what I do, and then discover how knitting and the knitting industry actually works. I think that has been a really good start for me, really, to start off working behind the scenes in dusty stock rooms and working with buy sheets and stock levels and all of that and doing pattern support. I think that was a really good way to start off.
Yeah, and there was a few interesting things you brought out there about when you went into your design work and it wasn't a strategic thing
Hmm.
in the way you developed your own brand, but there must have been from your previous work, obviously, like you said, you had all these beads you needed to move and we need a pattern to
Mm,
move them. There obviously was some element of strategy behind all of that. So maybe it wasn't conscious, but did that
yeah.
previous work set you up maybe to think
I
in
think
that
I
way?
learned a lot about how to um I've learned a lot about how to pull a collection together. How I know about how yarn lines are developed. I know about the time scale for the commercial side of things, how long it takes for a yarn company to develop a yarn line and put it into production and have it out on the shelves. I know what it means when it's announced that a yarn is discontinued. I know what it means when um a new line is announced and then doesn't appear for 8 months. I kind of understand that sort of whole thing to it. Um, I think what I've learned also I think in terms of pattern writing, I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot about writing quite short patterns. I've learned a lot about layout. I've learned a lot about abbreviations and what you have to have in a pattern. But more specifically, I think I've understood through my work with a young company that you need to know who your audience is at all time, and that you're never writing for yourself. You're always writing for somebody else. I may be designing a cardigan for myself, but I still need to make sure that what I do is communicated in a way that people can understand.
Yeah, definitely. It's a really good
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. I don't know if that answers your question at all. I kind of went off on a tangent.
We love a good tangent, Carrie. Don't worry about it, because that's the whole point of a conversation. I mean, I have set
Yeah,
questions, but
I
it's
know.
nice to go off
I
and
know.
let things develop as
I
we
don't.
chat.
Yeah, and also I think for me, I've learned that I think there are trends in knitting, like you need to have use circular needles, and it's top down, seamless, in the round, um, and you need to know 50 different cast on and cast off, but most knitters are not actually like that. And I think it's very off-putting for certain knitters that if you have a long list of technical requirements for a pattern. And my job, and I think definitely this is something that comes with my background, I see my job as being able to explain my design to the largest amount of people possible, in the simplest terms possible, because at the end of the day, it is just sticks and string, and I wanted to make it as accessible as I can to the most people, really, that I can possibly do. And I think a lot of people think the more techniques you throw at stuff, the better it gets. And I'm all about trying to make it as easy to knit, actually enjoyable still and interesting, but as easy to knit as possible. But that's just who I
Yeah.
am, and yeah, it's just who I am as a designer, I think, as well. um so yeah, maybe it's because I've met a lot of knitters, and you do have knitters who love all the different techniques, and I'm one of them myself, but I'm not writing for myself.
No, you brought out some really good points there, and I think it's really interesting to hear the thought process and what kind of inspires you and what your approach is when you produce your
Mm,
pattern. And the other thing you said that I really liked was about when you were developing organically, you didn't
mm,
know what you were going to be by the end of it, and that's something that's very
no.
common. Is that you can't know at the beginning. You might think you know, but you only know by trying or learn by trying what works for you.
Absolutely, and I think it is an ongoing process. When I look at
Mm,
designers I really, really admire, I admire them hugely, but they keep evolving as well. And it's never something you don't arrive fully formed, and
mm,
and you don't really stay still either. You keep learning and you keep adapting and you keep changing.
for sure. I've got loads of brilliant quotes to pull out of this now. I'm loving it already. I'm running on question two. Brilliant. So, being a bit nosy, because I have always wondered this, because there are some fantastic cake shops near where you stay. What
Mm.
does a typical day, and I'm not suggesting it involves cake, but it might. What does a typical day look like for you?
That is actually a really hard question, because one of the things I really love about my job is that no day is the same. I have a lot of hats. I'm trying to get rid of some of the hats I'm wearing. But I do wear a lot of hats, and that means on any given day I can get up and I can sit with spreadsheets all day. I think I'm quite famous on Twitter for keep talking about spreadsheets, but they're really lovely. Um, I know. Thank you for the snicker, Joe. Um,
I like a good spreadsheet myself.
Yeah. So some days I can get up and I can sit with a spreadsheet all day in front of the computer. Other days I may be going somewhere exotic, like the Western Isles or London or Northern Ireland, and I'm packing and I'm on a ferry or on a train. Other days I might be doing research somewhere in a research facility. Um, I very rarely actually have time to knit, and I think this is something that people find perplexing about my work, is that they go, "Oh, I'd love to sit down and knit," and I say, I would love that too. Most of my day is in front of a computer doing admin spreadsheets. Um, I would say my creative work, where I sit down and I start plotting things and designing things, is probably about 10% of my work. And then in the evenings I knit. I do my sample knitting in the evenings after work is done. It is when I was working part-time for the yarn company, I sat down and worked out I had about 80 hours a week. I was working 80 hours a week, and I'm down to probably about 50 or 60 hours.
Mm.
And I have one day off a week if I remember. So yeah, it doesn't really involve cake as much. It involves a lot of coffee. Um, but I don't really get out as much as people think. I just tend to sit at home in front of a spreadsheet and occasionally indulge in a Twitter rant about my spreadsheets.
Oh, awesome. So you talked a little bit about how you have different sort of types of work and when
Hmm.
you tend to do them.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about when you develop a new design, your creative process?
Hmm. Um, I this is one of the things that I get quite annoyed with myself about because I can't just do a design. I have to have context. I have to have a story. I have to have something um that sort of places my idea within a certain element, really. Let me see if I can explain what I mean. For at the moment, I'm doing a book called This Thing of Paper, which is about um, the invention of the printing press, or inspired by the invention of the printing press. So I had this big, massive idea. So my job was to find sources. So I would sit down and look at medieval manuscripts and sort of see what kind of color palette is do I sort of see before me? How were the colors produced? Oh, we're talking sort of rich jewel colors, mineral colors, and also sort of the color of the vellum or the parchment
Mm.
and the color of the ink. So I sort of take that as a color palette. Then I start to notice sort of design elements like decorative borders, geometrical motifs, specific um, motifs that keep occurring, like a fleur de lis or a sort of a diamond shape or a little star. And I sort of note all that down. And then I sort of start to think about how I can incorporate all these things organically into a design. So one of the things that I'm doing is a garment that is inspired by medieval manuscripts. And that means I can sort of think of having a background that's almost like the shade of vellum and then trying to find ways of incorporating borders within the garment. Would it be around the cuffs? Would it be around the yoke? Would it run down the button band? And I can sit and sketch. And after I've done all that work, I can finally sit down and swatch, except I also need to find yarn that corresponds to all that. So I've done a lot of research and I found yarn that reminds me the way it's not, maybe not the way that it feels in the hand, but sort of the handle of it feels a bit like parchment or paper. It has a certain crispness to it.
Mm.
And then just when I can sort of sit down and actually start designing. So it's a really long process for everything I do. I had a conversation with a fellow designer, and she said to me, "I don't know how you do it because I can't do all this context." And I looked at her and said, "But I can't do what you do, which is just to sit down and make pretty things
Mm.
appear. I have to have that whole long process until I reach that point." And I think the grass is always green on the other side because I would love to be able to just sit down and make beautiful hats appear or beautiful gloves or beautiful socks or a beautiful jumper. I just have a lot of work to do before I can get to that stage. It's quite laborious really when I think about it.
Maybe it's why you need so much coffee. No, it's really
Mm,
interesting though to hear about how everyone approaches it very differently.
yeah. Yeah, I think it's also because I have a really unfortunate tendency to come up with high concepts. I did a collection called Doggerland, which was inspired by archaeology and land art, and I was sort of I had a shawl called Ronus where you were knitting a submerged beach. And
Mm.
how would you knit a submerged beach? And that was sort of the thing I keep having in my head. How would you knit something that's not there? And it took me a long time to get that right. And it would just be a lot easier if I sort of started making, I don't know, like cupcake hats or or I don't know. I really wish I could come up with a simple concept sometimes, but apparently my brain doesn't work like that, and that's okay.
Mm.
I've almost accepted it.
Oh, but it's good though. It's good, and I think part of what people enjoy about your patterns is they do get
Mm.
that narrative that goes along with it.
Yeah, yeah. But wouldn't it be nice to just sit down and then just turn out a jumper? That'd be nice. But I mean, we're all different, and we can't change who we are. And we kind of, I think that's for me has been a part of the whole process in running my business is just to accept that I can't just do things, that I have to allow myself some time to sit and think and come up with ideas through that very long process. I think it's just the way my brain works, and that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the whole point of being your own boss and doing your own thing is you can allow yourself to do things the way you want to do them.
hmm Um, and it's sometimes scary and it's sometimes frustrating, but you learn from it and you learn to roll with it and learn to incorporate it into your working life.
Sure. So, taking it more to the business side of things
hmm
then, not everything goes to plan, as we know, and there are ups and downs to run a business. Um, what can you think about a time where maybe things didn't quite go to plan? What happened, and what did you learn as a result of it?
That's a really good question. I think that sometimes I've struggled with saying no to things. I've said yes to a couple of things which in retrospect I shouldn't have done. I've learned to read my contracts very, very, very carefully.
Mm.
And this is possibly one of the most important points is always read a contract. And if you don't have a contract, insist on getting a contract or at least have an email trail. Having something verbally agreed is a really bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
I had a point where I had a verbal agreement and I produced work and it nearly killed my business because I was not reimbursed at all for what I'd produced, and I spent a lot of money on of my own on producing these things, and I was never reimbursed, and that was a really really hair raising moment in time because I could have lost my entire business. And I learned from that that you need to have things in writing, and I've also learned. On a similar note, to double check that contract because sometimes you could end up with some pretty nasty surprises. But um, yeah, it was just, it is a business for, I mean, I think a lot of people saying, oh, we're all good friends in the knitting community and we're all getting along and everybody's nice. And that is true for the 99% of people, but sometimes you do get your fingers burned, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that managing of expectations and agreeing in advance, it just
hmm
removes any doubt.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And just be very clear what it is you sign on to do when you sign on to do something. One of the earliest pieces of advice came from a good friend of mine, Susan Crawford, who said to me, Karie, whenever you're offered a job or gig, ask yourself, do you benefit from this in some way, or is it all somebody else's glory you're contributing to?
Mm-hmm.
It sounds really callous, but when I've sort of been thinking about it, we all get these offers of exposure, work for exposure. And yes, exactly. And I think sometimes you can get quite tempted to go, oh my God, that sounds amazing. Of course, I'll be on board. And then you realize, hang on, this does not benefit me at all. It helps out somebody else. And that's not a good thing. I think it's important to learn to sort of stand up for yourself and say, actually, I also need to pay the rent. I need to pay my bills and I also need to protect myself, and that's okay. It is okay to say no to things, and it is okay to insist on a contract, and it is okay to insist on your own right.
Absolutely. And I mean, obviously, Susan's been doing this sort of thing for a long time as
Absolutely.
well.
Yeah.
But I think it is
Yeah.
that thing, and that's why I sort of snorted a little bit. I didn't know if you'd heard me, but you clearly did, about the payment in exposure. And I think you're
Yes.
absolutely right. Sometimes it is okay. It is okay to work for
Mhm.
free if you have something else that you want as
Mhm.
payment in lieu of actual cold
Uh-huh.
hard cash.
Uh-huh.
Um, that's a different sort of thing, I think, to, oh, come and, give away all your patterns and we'll give you some exposure. And
Yeah, the classic. Oh, give. I had a classic one. I had one saying, "Could I have all the rights to your most popular pattern on Ravelry, and in exchange, I'll put a link to your blog in our magazine." Yeah, that was lovely.
oh,
Another one I've had is somebody, and I've shared this story so many times because it's still brilliant. Somebody came to me and said, "I'm doing kits. They'll be sold in leading UK department stores, and I need you to design a pattern. You won't get paid, but you'll get exposure." And I said, "Okay, I've read the contract. My name will not be anywhere. Can you explain to me how I will be getting exposure from not having my name anywhere in these kits?" They never came back to me for some reason.
funny old thing. I think the moral of the
Yeah.
story is beware of the chancer.
Oh God, yes. Oh God, yes. But even if something doesn't smell like a chancellor and something does come across as very genuine and very realistic, always just make sure where you stand. And I would say that's probably what I've learned over the last few years is always be smart enough to insist on getting things in writing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And
Yeah.
assess that opportunity cost. Because when you say yes to one thing, you say no to others.
I'm still working on that one, Joe.
In the absence of a TARDIS, you're gonna have
What
to
time?
you have to learn how to do it, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah, I'm getting better at saying no. I am getting better at saying no, but it's also difficult because if somebody comes to you with a really fantastic idea, you really want to say yes. But I bought myself a wall planner, and I would say those £3 I spend on that wall planner, best thing ever, because I can actually see what's realistic and what's not that realistic. So I have begun to say, no, I'm afraid I can't do that for you, but we can start talking about, oh, I don't know, May 2017. So yeah, I am getting better, but it's difficult to say no as well. I think especially when you're self-employed because you always go, "Oh my God, what happens if I say no? They'll never come back to me." But people do get back to you.
Yeah, yeah, they do. And it's that kind of misunderstanding of the phrase no. No doesn't mean no forever. No doesn't mean you're a terrible person, I never want to work with you again. It's a no, I can't actually deliver this project on time to the level we would both want it done. So, no. It's a different
Exactly.
thing, isn't it?
Exactly. Exactly.
Oh, cool. So, taking it from important lessons and buying the best wall planner in the world ever, what's been the other end of the scale and the high point of your journey so far?
Oh my God. Um, there have been some really significant ones actually. I would say when I first put a pattern up for sale on Ravelry and I could pay my council tax that very month from the proceeds of that one pattern, that was a really empowering thing.
Mm,
I sort of sat down and thought, I've created this out of thin air and people like it and I can actually pay bills using that money. That was a really, really, really big moment for me. And I think sort of my whole career or business life it's sort of been a series of small points along the way. Um, from doing the pre-order to Doggerland, where I was just blown away, to teaching and meeting amazing people. I love teaching because you just really meet some fantastic, interesting people every single time. And now that I've put out this Kickstarter and it was funded within 25 hours, and I was floored. Um, There've been a lot of high points. There really have been, and it's difficult to single out a single one really. Uh, yeah, Um, I think it's just massive actually that I've managed to make this work. I mean, I went self-employed about 2 years ago, not even 2 years ago, and I've been able to make rent every month, and I've met so many interesting people who like what I do, and it's just such an honor really to be able to have this as my job. I still can't really believe it. There's a part of me that sort of says you'll wake up and you'll go back to learning about stock levels in a dusty room somewhere in the Midlands.
No, for sure. It's really cool to hear like the different points, and I think people always struggle to pick one
Mm,
of the good things, which is nice. It's really good. But you've talked a little bit about your Kickstarter there.
yeah,
Don't think you're
yeah.
getting away with it. We need to know more.
Well, it's for a book. This thing of paper, 10 patterns and garments and accessories and essays inspired by the age of Johannes Gutenberg. And I budgeted it at a very conservative 9,700, and I think we're at 13,000 something at the moment. I've kind of lost not the will to live at all. I've kind of gone, oh my God, I can't cope. My head's exploding a wee bit with the wonderfulness of it all. People have really rallied, and it's been absolutely. I'm shell shocked actually. I don't really have words for it, Joe. But yeah, it's due out next year in April. I've assembled a small but perfectly formed team to work with, because you can't do things like this on your own. I learned that the hard way by doing Doggerland completely on my own, which was a lot of hard work, and I don't want to go through that again.
Hmm.
So I've got some really good people on board with me, and I'm so excited. I'm actually so thrilled that people want it. People have been saying to me, like you have been saying to me for a while, make a physical book, Ms. Westerman, and I've gone, ah. Um, but it's happening, and people really want it, and it's so nice. It's happening, and I can't believe it really.
Well, it's just, the proof is in the pudding. And I think that because of the way you write your patterns and the way you're inspired, and how there
Mm,
always is this narrative around what you produce in a knitwear sense and things you
yeah,
write about it anyway, it's only natural that your audience do want a book they can put their hands on because knitters love physical books. They like to collect them.
absolutely.
So,
And it's kind of that idea that I've taken and run with it, because this thing of paper is about the physicality and materiality of books themselves. It is about
mm,
holding a book in your hand, and we all have favorite books that just feel right in our hands. And that sort of made me think about yarns, how we all have favorite yarns that we just hold in our hands and it feels right, or we have favorite needles that we keep coming back to. I've got a set of Addy Turbos,
mm.
375 millimeters, and the cable is really wretched, but I love it. They just feel so right in my hands. Um, and I kind of want to explore that sense of holding something, and something that's tactile and tangible and physical. And also because the whole period I'm writing about, you're going from something, manuscripts which are made by hand, manus made means hand, and going into something that's more and more increasingly machine made, which I think us as crafters, we can really respond to that whole movement and tension between something that's handmade and something that's machine made. I'm not a spinner, but I know people have a lot of feelings surrounding the whole, how you spin a yarn and how you work with hand spun yarn versus what it's like to work with commercially spun yarn. And it's all those sort of things that I've added to the context of this book, really. It's not just about books or books about books. It's about how we engage with the things that we really love and how we hold them and how our hands feel and how we by extension feel when we do it.
Yeah, definitely. There's loads of like interesting points that you bring out when you're describing it. It's obvious that you are, very literary and you like to read and you enjoy stories and you enjoy learning
mm,
about things from the
mm,
way that you
mm.
describe things.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
You're
Uh,
welcome. I love a good raconteur.
I also should say that in what I now refer to as a previous life, I was a book historian. I worked with the history of the book. So I'm drawing a lot upon that in my work now. And it also means that I haven't had to spend as much time doing research because I already have read those 15th century treatises. Thank you very much. With Doggerland, I had to spend a lot of time learning about archaeology and learning about geology and climate change and all sorts of things. And here I have a lot of the work already done, which means I can actually focus on getting the patterns right and getting the designs right. And that's really quite nice.
Absolutely. So this is going to be quite an interesting departure from our trail of thought, talking about
hmm
things you wish you'd known. What do you wish you'd known when you picked up the first ball of yarn, or when Dave fetched you the first ball of yarn?
Yeah, you like Dave, don't you?
I do. I do love a Nitty Dave. I'm a
Yeah.
big fan of the Nitty Daves.
Dave loves you too and told me to say hi.
Ah,
Um, what I wish I'd known, possibly that it would take over my life, because it has really transformed my life. I arrived in Scotland just knowing Dave. I mean, I moved here for his sake, and I didn't really have any friends when I moved here. And then obviously I fell ill and a terrible story, but knitting has given me a whole new life. I've got friends. I've got a job. I got my life back. I'm part of this wonderful community of really interesting people from all over the world who each have their own unique background story and a unique take on knitting. I've given academic talks on knitting. I've traveled so many fantastic places thanks to knitting. It's all immersive, really, and I don't know if I would have been scared if I told myself that when I picked up that ball again, that this would happen to you, Karie, and whether I would have dared to knit those stitches, but it's absolutely been a treasure. It's been a gift to be able to do this.
fantastic. Now I'm going to ask you about choosing between favourite children almost here. So, if you were going to be marooned on a desert island and you could
hmm
only take one skein or ball of yarn, what would you take and why?
Ah, Sophie's choice. Um, what do you mean I can only take one? Desert on disc, you can take eight.
No, no, just one. It's
Okay.
you're being marooned, so
Ah.
there isn't any space to pack. It's just what you've got in your hand at the moment. Like you've got a
Um,
handbag with with
yeah,
with a skein of yarn.
I always say there is no such thing as a bad skein of yarn. There's a yarn for every season and every purpose apart from eyelash yarn.
I love eyelash yarn.
I know you do. I know you do. We're not talking about that. No, what would it be? It would probably be, oh God, it would probably be a heavy one ply lace weight yarn. It would be something really rustic and sheepy smelling and probably either plant dyed or undyed. That would probably be it. And I would have like 1700 yards of it. And I would just sit there and be happy. I really do like my rustic lace weights. I do. It's a terrible affliction.
So, which rustic lace weight can we
I
push you for a
can
brand?
probably from some little smallholder somewhere. And the sheep is called George. I don't know. Anything anything that's really sheepy and one ply, maybe two, no, one ply, heavy one ply, and rustic, and not any specific brand because there's so many wonderful things out there. But yeah, let's take George the one ply.
George the one ply. Okay,
Yeah.
Gavin's going to go and look for this now. Someone's going to start a George one ply line, I can tell.
But yeah, I don't know. It was one of those things when I first got back into knitting and I discovered the whole magical world of yarn and I tried out all these different yarns. And then just that one ply, slightly overspun, rustic, sheepy smelling thing. I think it's a real knitters thing.
Mm.
Um, where, if I was sitting on a train going back from Manchester a couple of weeks ago, and I was knitting with a really sheepy yarn, and I was sitting chatting to the person next to me on the train, and who was a knitter as well, and we were talking about it, and these two young chaps, sort of youth, maybe about 20, were sitting there with their mobile phones opposite us, sort of looking at us like we were sort of aliens. And then at the end of the journey, one of them said, can I have a feel? And he reached over and touched my knitting and looked at this really sheepy one ply yarn, and he just went, "Ha, that's nice." I just love that because it's not something that's really immediate to to non-knitters, but there is really so much charm captured in something, a yarn like that. But I love all yarns, really. I've never met a yarn I didn't like, apart from, well, I did not like the can scarf ruffly yarn, uh, but that's probably about it. Um, all yarns are wonderful.
Oh, fantastic. You know I'm going to send you a skein of eyelash yarn for Christmas, don't you?
I would expect nothing less of you.
And I'll ask after it every time I see you as well.
I'll design something especially for you in eyelash yarn.
Oh, you're a babe. Thank you. What? What's your favourite or your go-to resource? Obviously not eyelash yarn. For yarn
Mhm.
craft or business that you couldn't do without.
I would actually say social media. I think that's a really trite answer, possibly, but I think it's a wonderful, wonderful gift. I have in the past managed to get a tech editor, schedule a photo shoot with a model, and find a stylist that could help me out with makeup within 10 minutes of asking on Twitter.
Mm.
Um, it was not something I would do today, but I was able to do that. And that just brought it home to me what a wonderful tool social media is. If I got a question, if I got something, I'm sitting there going, I can't really make this work. Why can I not make this work? Why does this not work out? I can put it in a tweet, and within 3, 4 minutes, a lot of my colleagues out there, or tech editors, or magazine editors or whatever they are, can come back to me and say, have you thought about rejigging it so the comma is there, or maybe write, instead of 2p, p2, maybe just write p1 and then parentheses add da 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 da. And I'm going, oh, this is wonderful. We are all sitting on our own in our own little homes working on these things, but we are connected thanks to the wonderful uh medium of or media, really, social media. And I can answer other people's queries as well, that may be sitting there wrestling with something, and we have sort of the whole network. And it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. That's possibly the best resource, is social media, Ravelry as well. I include that in that.
Fantastic. So, talking about social media and people chatting to you and stuff, where is the best place for people to come find you?
Um, I am a lot on Twitter ranting about spreadsheets. Um, I am on Instagram as well. I am on Pinterest. And I am no, I'm no longer on Snapchat. I couldn't figure out how to work Snapchat, so I'm no longer I feel so old. But I'm Karie Bookish on all those places. That's KarieBookish. And if people are really interested in Eurovision, I also have a Eurovision Twitter feed, but that's beside the point.
I love that. Your Eurovision tweets make me laugh. So, do you have any parting words for those who would like to get into the industry, or indeed Eurovision?
Well, for Eurovision, it's easy. Just sit there and start watching the national finals in January and take it from there. Seriously, best 5 months of the year's Eurovision. Um, anyway, no, people who want to get into the industry, I would say what Susan said to me. I always think of yourself when people ask you to do something. Always be aware that you need to benefit in some sort of way, whether it's, you being able to pay your bills, or you may be getting a mention in a magazine, i.e., more people hear about you, or whatever. But the other thing, I was sort of thinking about that the other day, is, and this kind of runs counter to what I said earlier on, I think when you enter the industry, when you come into the industry, be aware of what it is you want to achieve. And I don't mean in the sense of, oh, I want to appear at Vogue Knitting, or I want to do a book, or I want to have my own yarn line. Nothing like that. When I started working in this industry, it was important to me that I would have a working life that would accommodate me. I'm a terrible introvert. I'm such an introvert. And I also love people, but people drain me of energy really, really quickly. So for me, it was important to have a job where I could have long stretches of time to myself, just me and my work without interruption. And then ever so often go out and meet amazing, fantastic people. And I think I've achieved that in my working life, because most of the time, like I said, I'm just at home in front of the screen looking at spreadsheets. And then I go out to teach knitters who are wonderful people. And I get so energized and so happy by meeting all these fantastic people. And then I get tired, and then I have a week of my own company again. But that's just my specific situation. So whoever wants to start working in the industry, figure out what it is you want to achieve, because if you're not like me and you love people all the time, maybe you want to start a yarn shop, or I don't know, if you're really good at maths and get a lot of satisfaction from working out sort of math problems all the time. Technical editor is the obvious thing. And it's all about sitting down and finding out what your strengths and weaknesses are and how you can translate that into actual viable jobs within the industry. And then finally, just be aware it takes a lot of work. It's a lot of long hours. So much work, you have no idea. But at the end of the day, it's all good stuff.
Fantastic. So, what's next for you then? What can we look forward to over the next few months from you?
Well, I'll be at Leeds Wool Festival. I don't know when this interview goes out, whether it's before or after Leeds Wool Festival. All my classes are sold out, but I shall be floating around. I'm teaching less and less over the next half a year, because obviously I'll be working on my book. Can't believe I'm saying that out loud, but I am. But yeah, I'll be working on my book. I'll be teaching here and there. Keep a lookout on my website for information. And I have a few ideas of what I'll be doing after this thing of paper is released, but it's still quite mind-boggling that I actually will be working on a book for the next 6 months to 7 months. So yeah, oh my God.
It's really exciting.
It's mind-boggling. So yeah, I'll be doing lots of stuff, but I'll probably not be out teaching as much as I have been doing in the past. So if you want to do a workshop with me and you see one advertised, jump on it, because it may take a while before you see me again.
Fantastic. Lovely. Well, Karie, thank you so much for your time. I know how busy you are, and I really appreciate you coming onto the show to chat to us.
Oh, thank you so much, Jo. It's such a pleasure. Absolutely such a pleasure.
So there we have it. I hope you enjoyed that chat with Karie and heard all of the background stories, and I got a bit more of an insight into her design process and why she does what she does and how she got involved. I'm enjoying this little bird outside. It's very noisy, and it's overcast, and I think they think it's dawn. Maybe you can hear that too. Quite sweet. Anyway, that is all we have time for this week. I hope you've enjoyed the show, and I will be back again with you in 2 weeks' time. Remember, not next week, the week after, to be chatting to you again. So, have a wonderful week. Happy crafting. And I will speak to you all again soon. Bye. You've been listening to the Shinybees podcast, a podcast for those who like their knitting, comedy and yarn in equally large measures. If you'd like to get in contact with me, you can do so via the blog, or on Shinybees on Ravelry, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest and Facebook. You can email me at shinybeesinfo@gmail.com. Music for this episode is provided by Music Alley, and it is Adam and the Water Boys and I Need a Drink.
I need a drink.